Here is something that should have been a major headline and wasn't. The European Central Bank, the institution that controls monetary policy for 20 countries and 350 million people, ran a live experiment to test how Europe's next generation of tokenized financial markets will settle transactions in central bank money. They chose two platforms to run that experiment. One of them was built on the XRP ledger. They did not announce it that way. The press release said Axiology, a distributed ledger technology platform. The regulatory filing said DLT pilot regime. The official documentation referenced private systems built on open source code. But when you follow the technical architecture down to its foundation, when you trace what Axiology actually runs on, who built it, and who backed it, you arrive at the same place every time. The XRP ledger. Confirmed, tested. Inside the European Central Bank's own experiment for the digital future of European finance. And almost nobody connected those dots. Today, we are going to connect them. All of them. Slowly, precisely, and completely. Welcome to the Calm Analyst. Let me start with what the European Central Bank actually said this week, because the language they used carries more weight than the financial media gave it credit for. The ECB stated publicly, a new phase of digital finance is taking shape. We aim to achieve an integrated European market for digital assets with safe central bank money as the backbone of the system. Parse that carefully. Not an exploratory phase, not a pilot program. A new phase, an integrated market, central bank money as the backbone. The European Central Bank is not describing a future possibility. It is describing a construction project that is already underway, and it is explicitly positioning itself as the settlement anchor of Europe's tokenized financial ecosystem. What does that mean in practice? It means that when tokenized bonds, tokenized securities, tokenized government debt, and eventually tokenized equities settle in Europe, the final settlement step, the one that makes the transaction legally complete and financially irreversible, will happen in central bank digital money. Not stablecoins, not commercial bank deposits, central bank money. And the ECB has already started testing what that infrastructure looks like. In its second wave of settlement experiments, organized under the Eurosystem's central bank money settlement framework, it selected platforms to run live trials. Two platforms were chosen. One was built on Polygon. One was Axiology, built on the XRP ledger. Europe is not planning the digital financial system. Europe is building it. And the XRP ledger has already been tested inside it. Let me trace the Axiology connection precisely, because this is the thread that unlocks the full picture. Axiology is a decentralized securities project built through a partnership between Ripple and SuperHow, a blockchain research lab with deep roots in European central banking. The project was developed explicitly within the scope of the EU's DLT pilot regime, the regulatory framework that allows financial institutions to test distributed ledger technology for security settlement without being bound by legacy market infrastructure regulations. The settlement of tokenized securities requires a tokenized settlement asset. Cash on its own cannot settle a blockchain-based transaction. You need a digital representation of money that can move atomically with the security being transferred. Axiology's architecture addresses this using the XRP ledger's native capabilities: atomic settlement, programmability, an integrated order book, and the ability to issue and transfer tokenized assets in a single transaction. The leader of Axiology's project is not a crypto entrepreneur. He is a former central banker who worked at the Bank of Lithuania, the Bank of England, and held a chair position at the BIS's CBDC working group from 2019 through 2022. This is a person whose entire career has been spent inside the institutions that are now building the digital financial system, and he chose to build Axiology on the XRP ledger. Ripple's VP of Central Bank Engagements confirmed publicly that Ripple was working with more than 30 central banks at the time of Axiology's development. The Axiology project, with its EU regulatory credentials, its BIS-connected leadership, and its XRP Ledger Foundation, is the clearest window we have into what those central bank conversations actually produced. And this, tracing the thread from an ECB press release, through a DLT pilot project, through a former BIS central banker, through the XRP Ledger, is exactly the kind of investigation this channel exists to do. Because the connections that matter most in this space are never in the headline. They are always one layer deeper. If that kind of depth is what you have been missing, subscribe to The Calm Analyst right now. Hit that button and turn on notifications, because the Amina Bank and 21x connection I am about to show you is the piece that closes the loop completely and makes the full European picture impossible to ignore. Let's finish this. Here is where the architecture becomes genuinely remarkable, because it is not just Axiology that connects Ripple to Europe's official tokenized capital markets infrastructure. 21x is the EU's first fully regulated distributed ledger technology trading and settlement system. It received approval from BaFin, ESMA, and the ECB. It operates on-chain order books, supports tokenized securities, and enables atomic settlement. It is, by regulatory design, one of the two official DLT platforms chosen for the ECB's settlement experiment. 21x runs on Polygon, not the XRP Ledger directly, but here is where the connection closes. Amina Bank, a Swiss-regulated institution and the first major bank globally to custody and trade USD on blockchain rails, recently became a Ripple payments partner. Amina is the first bank in Europe running full Ripple payments for instant cross-border fiat and stablecoin flows. And Amina Bank is partnered directly with 21x. Follow the chain. The ECB's experiment has two platforms. Axiology is built on the XRP Ledger. 21x is partnered with Amina Bank. Amina Bank runs full Ripple payments. Both platforms, the only two chosen by the ECB for its tokenized settlement experiment, have direct connections to Ripple's infrastructure. This is not a claimed partnership. This is a documented architecture. Both pathways lead back to Ripple. Both are operating under the ECB's regulatory framework. And Ripple holds its EU license, confirmed in January of this year, allowing it to scale its payment infrastructure across every EU jurisdiction. The question is no longer whether XRP technology is being considered for Europe's tokenized financial system. It is already inside it. The question is how deeply it gets embedded as the system scales from experiment to production. Let me add one more piece of this week's European story, because I think it is the most practically significant and the least reported. On January 27th, the ECB issued a document confirming that DLT-issued securities would be accepted as eligible collateral starting March 30th. That date has now passed. What that means: banks operating within the European financial system can now use assets issued on distributed ledger technology networks, tokenized bonds, tokenized securities, as collateral to unlock central bank liquidity. The assets do not need to settle through legacy infrastructure. They can be issued and settled entirely on DLT networks and still qualify for use in the ECB's monetary operations. This is the regulatory unlocking that makes everything else we have discussed actionable. It is not enough to say that tokenized securities can exist on the XRP Ledger. The question regulators and institutions needed answered was, can those securities be used in the real financial system? Can they serve as collateral? Can they unlock central bank liquidity? The ECB has answered yes, effective March 30th. And the platforms that have already been tested and validated inside the ECB's experimental framework, including Axiology on the XRP Ledger, are now operating in an environment where the assets they settle are eligible for use in central bank operations. The experiment phase is ending. The production phase is beginning. Let me close by placing everything in its proper context, because I think the synthesis is more important than any individual piece. The European Central Bank wants an integrated European market for digital assets, with central bank money as the settlement backbone. It has tested that vision through a live experiment. Both platforms chosen for that experiment have documented connections to Ripple's infrastructure. DLT-issued securities are now eligible ECB collateral. Ripple holds its EU operating license. Amina Bank, Ripple's European banking partner, is directly connected to 21X, the EU's first regulated DLT trading system. And running underneath all of it, tested and validated inside Europe's own regulatory framework, is the XRP ledger. This is not a future narrative. It is a current architecture, already built, already tested, already holding ECB regulatory approval for collateral eligibility. The market has not priced this in. Most people following XRP's daily price chart have no idea this exists. And the gap between what is documented and what is reflected in the current market valuation is, in my view, one of the most significant disconnects in the current financial landscape. Europe is building the next generation of its financial system. The XRP ledger is already inside it. And the patient investor who understands that, who can hold that structural reality through the current noise, is positioned for the moment the market finally catches up. The ECB announcement, the axiology architecture, the 21X and Amina connection, the March 30th collateral decision. These are the threads that, when followed carefully, tell a story that the price chart will eventually reflect. Finding those threads, following them precisely, and explaining them clearly, that is what this channel is here to do every single week. If that is the analysis you have been looking for, subscribe to The Calm Analyst right now. Hit the button, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who is following XRP's price, but not yet following XRP's architecture. Because the architecture is where this story actually lives. Thank you genuinely for watching. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Stay calm, stay informed, and I will see you in the next video.